Hello, I'm Tony Guida. This is My New York. It's the economy, stupid. Bill Clinton rode that campaign mantra to the White House 25 years ago. Today, Donald Trump is president, largely because of an economy that millions of voters feel has shipwrecked them. Just what are the chances the new administration will lift their boats? My guest today is full of provocative thoughts on Wall Street, the economy, and Donald Trump. He is Jeff Madrick. You'll meet him next. I'm happy to welcome to the program Jeff Madrick, who, among other things, was an economic columnist for the Times, who is currently a senior fellow at the Century Foundation, and you could tell us what that is, and has written half a dozen books and makes a heck of a martini, I think. I don't know. What is the Century Foundation?
It's a long-standing, very old foundation.
Used to be the 20th century.
Used to be the 20th until we turned to the 21st century.
Right.
And they got smart in hopes of lasting to the 22nd and took a number out of it. But by and large, it's a progressive foundation dedicated to research. They used to mostly publish books when people read books.
Right.
Now they do a lot of studies. And I have a little organization within it. We do a lot of public forums. We contract papers. We're dedicated to what I call rediscovering government in an age that's by and large anti-government.
Well, we'll talk about, yes, it is. We'll talk about some of that as we go along today, but I thought we'd start with the markets, the Wall Street. Ever since November 8th, they've shot up and have pretty much maintained some glorious highs. What's going on? Is this confidence in the new president? Is this irrational exuberance?
Well, there's a point at which it will be irrational exuberance, and we never know that point for sure. But I think, I felt right after the election, first of all, as you well remember, I'm sure you're watching the TV screen.
Yeah.
The Dow Jones Industrial Futures, which is an indication of next day's prices, were collapsing. And some prominent economists were calling for worldwide depression, and the Dow Jones Industrials would never reach their current highs.
I think 2 o'clock in the morning was when I turned off, and at that point they were like down, the futures were down like 750.
Yeah, and they got to almost 900, I think. The next day, the market started going up, and people were totally perplexed. I did write something on this for the New York Review of Books, which now has a blog. And my argument was this: actually, Trump is providing a Keynesian stimulus to the economy, which, ironically, many liberal economists advocated. What they didn't advocate were tax cuts to get there.
Okay.
They advocated infrastructure spending or more social spending, but they also advocated a bigger deficit.
Well, let's talk about how you read Keynesianism into this. Where are you seeing that?
Well, Keynes argued that if the economy is fairly soft, you need more government spending. He also said tax cuts could accomplish the same thing. You need a bigger government deficit, more spending than taxes, taking taxes in. That would create the demand for goods and services, which would reignite the confidence of business. Now, many mainstream economists argue we're rolling along pretty well finally, and evidence suggests Obama handed off a pretty nice economy to Trump. But a lot of economists, and I fell into this camp, believed there was much more growth in this economy than the falling unemployment rate suggested, because lots of people stopped looking for work. So we needed to pump the economy harder. And Obama had resisted this, but not nearly as much as the Republicans, and some other Democrats resisted this. And Trump willy-nilly says, we'll get huge tax cuts, we'll get that federal deficit. The problem is, down the road, we'll pay a price for those tax cuts. It's not the efficient way to stimulate an economy by giving big tax cuts to the rich.
And that seems to be the plan, and we'll come to that in a second. But what you're reading is I could use the word perhaps contrarian to what people think it is the reason why the markets are reacting the way they are. What you're saying seems to fly in the face of the prevailing economic orthodoxy in Washington, which is conservative and essentially tax cuts, give it to the rich, trickles down, everybody benefits, which of course hasn't worked in the past. Why do you think the markets think? I mean, in your view, why do you think the markets think this will be different this time?
Well, no, I think the markets think we'll get growth. I think corporations will make profits. And actually, for a while, jobs will be created. Wages may even go up. It's just the wrong way to do this. We tried this once before, Reaganomics.
Right.
Within 2 years, less than 2 years, Reagan found he had to raise taxes because the deficit against which he ran, the deficit of Jimmy Carter, was getting way out of hand.
Right.
You didn't get the growth you wanted, but more important, with Reagan, the age of inequality began. Wages for typical Americans started stagnating. Productivity, the source of prosperity, the output per hour of work, grew slowly, not rapidly, despite the tax cuts, which were supposed to incentivize business people, as well as the deregulation, which was supposed to remove all this red tape that was holding us back. So ultimately, while we grew, we didn't grow rapidly enough to create an equal sharing of that economic pie.
Well, I
and
think
that, I'm afraid, is what we're in for now.
it seems to me, I recall that median family income in Reagan's years did go up some, and we did have a pretty strong market, at least for a while. But you're saying overall that didn't matter as much, or
That median family income went up moderately, especially in the first few years of the Reagan administration.
Right.
Remember, we came off a very sharp recession, the sharpest since the Depression to that point. But they did go up. What really went up was the family income of those in the top 20%, and what skyrocketed was the family income of those in the top 1%, and of course the 0.1%.
Right.
So it was an age of inequality. At the bottom, bottom 20%, incomes did not go up. So it began an age of inequality. As you say, median family income went up moderately, but only slightly, only somewhat higher than their 1978 highs, 2 or 3 years before Reagan took office. And and maybe most important to the economy, we didn't sow the seeds of future prosperity because productivity did not really grow rapidly. And capital investment, business investment started to fall off in the Reagan years. He was supposed to be the pro-business president. Investments started to fall off. I believe ultimately the same thing will happen if Trump's policies actually do get passed.
the inequality you talk about under Reagan, you see that kind of as the roots for what just happened in November?
Yes, to put it in a word, yes. It turns out that rural America, which really in many respects is white working America, did not participate in rising wages and the growth of jobs the way the rest of America, urban America, did. So there's a real, not only is there a black-white gap and a Latino and a gender gap, females and males, there's a white gap in America that it seems the Obama administration didn't fully recognize. And these people have been doing poorly. A lot of it is an old manufacturing country, which was red meat to Donald Trump. He said, immigration is killing you, but what's really killing you is trade with all these foreign countries that are beating us over the head, that are killing us. I love this idea that China, which is not necessarily fair in its trade practices, but China, where the average wage is maybe $1 a day, they're killing us, beating us over our heads. But he found an easy target. He promised tariffs for these people. But he recognized somehow that these people were being left out of America, and the Democrats did not recognize that adequately.
I guess we should put the exclamation point or the finishing touch on the point about the stock market and the economy and the always true statement that stock prices are not a reliable, measure of the economy. They reflect lots of things, but they're not necessarily a great. Give us economics 101 on that.
Well, here's the thing. It's tricky, actually. The market usually goes up when the economy is stronger, so the
Sure.
market should be suggesting a stronger economy. But since Reagan, basically, the market on balance, we had a crash or two in the meantime, but the market on balance has soared. Mm-hmm. Wages for typical Americans have gone the other way. They've stagnated. For some, they've actually gone down over 30 or 40 years, adjusted for inflation. That's an anti-American historical fact. That hasn't happened in America in the past, even in the 1800s, over so long a period of time. But my point is, my contrarian point about this market is, it's going up after the election. It went up after the election because the economy is probably going up. But that doesn't mean, and it didn't go up because, quote unquote, we have a pro-business president. Markets have actually usually gone up more under Democrats than under Republicans, and Republicans have been pro-business on balance. It's gone up in the short run because of economic growth, but when markets go up, exactly as you said, it doesn't mean wages are going up, doesn't mean productivity has returned to rapid growth. Lots of other things have to happen.
Well, it's a reflection of corporate, in a large way, it's a reflection, the market prices are a reflection of corporate profits.
And under Reagan, of falling interest rates.
Yeah, and also a sense or maybe a perception that the absence of other things for investors to invest in or for companies to invest in. I mean, you got, I don't know if I'm conflating things here, but you've got companies like Google with an enormous stock price, but also sitting on tons of cash and in effect not growing its business, not being in that sense productive for the economy. I mean,
this is a Keynesian issue. Before Keynes, the economic orthodoxy argued if there's a lot of savings, lots of piles of money, lots of profits, business will invest it. Keynes said no, people will not invest savings. This was radical. Invest savings just because they exist. They'll invest if they perceive a demand for goods and services. So he said government sometimes, and I'd argue often, has to pump up that demand for goods and services because it doesn't happen naturally. Free markets are not perfect. They're not remotely perfect. The prior economic orthodoxy was free markets would promote that investment.
Lift all boats.
So not quite, yes, but that's why Trump's tax cuts suddenly are a stimulus that that investors felt was necessary to get investment going.
Right.
We're talking, in any case, I could go on.
No, I take your point. We were talking about the core of his support and the people who, in large measure, elected him. In some ways, they seem to have voted against their own best interests in doing that. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely. What we needed, but I don't think it was presented clearly enough by the Hillary Clinton camp, what we needed was a growth plan that emphasized growth, but also that emphasized social programs that could spread and share that growth in adequate ways. We need all kinds of social programs, I think, which is anathema now, it seems, to the ears of Americans. But we need apprenticeship programs. We probably need some job creation for youth. We used to remember the old days when everybody was afraid that teenagers would set up Manhattan on fire? So what did the federal government do? They created summer jobs. We create very few summer jobs for teenagers now, to take one example.
One example, yeah.
So I don't think the Democrats served the country well with their policies, but infinitely better than these fantasy politics of Donald Trump.
Well, let's talk about it. We talked about the tax cuts that appear to be coming, and they appear, I mean, if you look at what Paul Ryan has advocated over the years, and now he's the House Speaker, it's just windfall for the richest in our
Yeah.
among us, and the relaxation of government controls on almost everything. How are these people that we were talking about, these rural, the white working class Trump support, how are they going to benefit from that?
I think they're not going to benefit, and I think it's even worse. I think the Congress, the Republican Congress, is scared of budget deficits. They're going to say, hey, if we only give Trump the tax cuts he wants, we're going to get a soaring budget deficit, more spending than taxes for the federal government. What are they going to do? They're going to look to chop social programs up. That's what happened under Ronald Reagan. And I did a conference recently with Sandy Levin, the ranking Democrat on the House Ways and Means Committee. He said, it's coming. We got to be ready to fight. So if they chop social programs, those social programs actually help those workers.
What would be on the block? I mean, your first 2 or 3 examples of what might be.
Expanding more liberal unemployment insurance, significant job training will be cut or wiped out. Trade assistance training will be cut or wiped out. Any thought of new programs to help these people will be cut out. And if they cut Obamacare, as they say they will, it could hurt. I think the one estimate I saw is 5 to 8 million of these people who voted for Trump.
You wonder,
white working Americans,
right,
are getting health care because they couldn't before Obamacare.
there are so many people who have health care. There are things, let's stipulate, there are things wrong with Obamacare that need fixing. But Trump has said, and the man he appointed, to run Health and Human Services, Dr. Tom Price, is, at least in his past, has committed to, if he ever got the power, he's going to end Obamacare. Now he's got the power, or at least he's got the cabinet. Will have the cabinet spot. How do you sell that to people when? I mean, you can't just throw it out. You have to come with, an alternative idea, right?
Exactly. I totally agree with you. One of the Obamacare also wasn't perfect, as we know, but one of the advantages, and I thought one of the political advantages right away, is it provided health insurance for 22 million Americans. Now, are you going to take that away from them? Are you going to provide what Donald Trump has talked about, a system where insurance companies must provide insurance to people who have prior conditions? How are you going to do that? How are you going to pay for that?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to pay for that if you don't have a big system with healthy people in it.
Exactly, and that's been both I suppose the good thing about Obamacare and the source of its trouble. I mean, if you're going to require companies to cover people with pre-existing conditions, you need a lot of healthy people in there help to pay for that, for the cost of that, and you need subsidies to do that, right?
Absolutely. It's going to be very difficult. First of all, the basic assumption is wrong that people can really that the free market can allocate health care the way it allocates Buicks and cornflakes. Just can't happen. Cornflakes is infinitely more complex a product than what cancer treatment you should have. So it's very difficult to work on as a fundamental foundation. But this idea that you can retain the good parts of Obamacare without all of Obamacare is nonsense. And they are, I think, running scared. They don't know how to deal with it. And they don't know what the reaction of the public will be. So it's going to be pretty fascinating. It's the old story. That guy who shouted, or gal, I don't remember who said, keep government out of my Medicare. Well, some people are going to start saying, keep government out of my Obamacare. Obamacare has a nasty connotation, unfortunately, but I think there are lots of reasons to think Republicans will pay a big price for their current political stands. But maybe not in 2018. That's
right. Well, we'll see. Let's go a little further with how the folks who elected Trump might benefit or not benefit. You talked about job creation. There's talk of an infrastructure, some sort of program to do the things we need to do in this country, long past due, bridges, roads, tunnels, everything. And the way to do that, it would seem, in a time of very low interest rates, is let government borrow the money and put it to work, like we built the interstate highway system, like we built the Erie Canal, like we built the railroad, transcontinental. But that apparently is not the idea that Trump has, the way to do this. Can you explain what you've seen? I mean, obviously we haven't gotten specifics, but what we know so far about how he hopes to do this?
I don't think he has a serious idea about how to do this. It's Wilbur Ross, who's a private equity guy, basically buys down and out companies, fires people, cuts back this and that, in hopes of saving this company. I don't want to totally denigrate what he does, and then sell it at a higher price. The amount of personal fortunes that have been made in America over the last 20 years doing that is mind-boggling. I think people generally recognize that. But there's no meat in the Trump plan. He says it will have to be for profitable infrastructure and will collect tolls on these roads. Think about this, though, when you bring up the white working class who voted for Trump. They live in rural areas. How many people are going to drive on these new roads and pay tolls?
Yeah.
That kind of program is suited for suburban, metropolitan areas with lots of drivers, if it's suited at all.
The details that I've read, and again, this is preliminary and nothing's been enacted yet, as you say, is to do this in effect privately, to in effect give tax credits to, let's say, companies to build a road or a bridge or something, and it winds up costing them 18 cents on the dollar. Because of an 82% tax credit, and then they own it and they get the profits off it. So we're privatizing what should be public, and we're making huge profits for if the plan, as it was spelled out in the preliminaries, if it holds that way. But then,
I completely agree with.
What about infrastructure that's not profitable? How do you who's going?
Or we don't know if it'll be profitable.
Yeah, or if we don't know. I mean, waste treatment plants, there's no money to be made, there's no income, there's no toll. So those kinds of things are not going to get built or fixed at all, right?
This idea of Wilbur Ross's that Trump, probably willy-nilly as he does most things, subscribe to, totally contradicts basic economic theory on both sides of the ledger, would even contradict what Milton Friedman favored. Public spending is usually for projects that we need socially, that benefit us economically, but doesn't benefit any individual corporation enough to invest in it. It might benefit the neighborhoods, might benefit lots of working people in concentric circles around this particular project. That's what public investment is about. Friedman called them neighborhood effects. Lots of economists did. We call them public investments where private incentives are not adequate. This is the opposite of that. It's foolish. I could say a lot about foolish policies being proposed. That's one of them. And people should, I think you raised the right point. We didn't build the highways with an idea that they were going to make a profit for anybody's but the construction people who are putting them up.
Right.
We built them to make transportation much more efficient, to develop the suburbs for good and bad, but I think on balance, I grew up in the suburbs, so I know how bad it can be, but on balance, help people get cheaper homes and live better lives, and have a more prosperous economy as business moved out there. This is a critical issue that hasn't come. There's been so much attention to the tax credit, which is enormous and ridiculous. There hasn't been enough attention to this very point.
We could go on about the economics that are coming and seem to be coming, and the effect on all of us, in addition to the group that is largely responsible for Trump. But I want to go to another of your private, or your personal, not private, your personal interests and a subject that you're passionate about, child poverty in this country. And you've got an interesting idea about how to address that. Let's talk about that.
Child poverty in America, the proportion of children who are poor in America is higher than any other major rich nation in the world. What I mean by major is large and rich. That's stunning. I mean, it's much higher than it is in countries like France and Germany. And our poverty rate, the way we measure poverty, is lower than they would in most European countries. What's happened is 4 or 5 things over the last 30 or 40 years. We know a lot more about how poverty affects children, and it's very, very damaging. 2, it creates bad workers. We lose those kids when they grow up as good workers. The economy can no longer afford that. When Michael Harrington wrote The Other America in 1962, the economy was going great guns. By comparison, productivity was rising.
How would you address this?
And let's keep in mind one other thing, Tony. Child poverty is not the fault of children. And we're blaming them, really, in the old American way, self-reliance, responsibility. How we address it now, to some degree, is tax credits, but we don't address it aggressively enough. I would give allowances, outright cash, to the families of poor kids, maybe even 1.5 or 2 times the poverty rate. We've learned, some of the research has been very clear that money matters. Money matters most. Parents become more, they become calmer. They spend the money on the kids' welfare. We have this nasty attitude that they'll go out and spend it on drugs and who knows what, and whatever.
I was thinking I could already hear the
it's going to
voices
come like
from
crazy.
Washington. Yeah, you give them the money, the cash, they're going to waste it.
But here's the thing: almost every Western European nation and some Eastern European nations and many South American nations already do this. And the evidence shows the parents, for the most part, create a much more nourishing environment for their kids. That's what I would advocate. I'd love to see America move in that direction. I'm not sure the Democrats
for this
would.
in this
Pretty
administration
low.
are zero.
I would say close to zero. But I'm going to advocate it aggressively. I'm writing a book. And we commissioned a study, by the way, from Columbia, which houses maybe the best experts around on this issue. And they found that you get more bang for your buck in terms of poverty reduction with a cash allowance than you would with the child tax credits.
Well, I said at the beginning of this program, Jeff Madrick is full of provocative ideas, and you've heard only some of them. If you want to know more, you can look up his books. I think the latest one is How Big Should Government Be? Is that the latest one?
I co-authored that with some people. The other one is
Seven Bad Ideas.
7 Bad Ideas.
So you can go look for that. And it's a delight to see you. And thank you for a stimulating discussion. And hope to see you soon.
Keep in touch, please.
Okay. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.